Hello, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Professor, a crowd-funded, crowd-driven feature where we respond to your questions on everything from current events to economics, political philosophy, the course of history, the role of great men or preposterous fools in human events, all the things that matter to us in our common life. And one thing that matters to us is your support. Please visit my website, that's www.johnrobson.ca. Make a monthly pledge, $3, $5, $10 to keep the It Happened Todays, the quotations of the day, and also the Ask the Professor features live and well.
All right. Now, here's a question from Matthew, who asks, given that usually local authorities are more efficient than more distant authorities, just generally speaking, he's right about that. Why, he says, don't we think about maybe getting rid of the National Department of Aboriginal Affairs, of Indian Affairs, and just simply give the money to the reserves or some kind of local authority at the reserve level and keep the federal department here just in the business of auditing them? Wouldn't that be better?
That's
be
an
worse
excellent
anyway.
question. And let me start by stating my very strong agreement that most matters should be handled locally. Anything that can be handled locally should be.
Right.
We need national governments to do certain things. We need to have a uniform criminal code across the nation. We need to have national defense, the suppression of force and fraud, the primary reason for which people enter into society and create governments. And then things like weights and measures also fall
You always
under
bring
that.
up weights and measures. I love weights and measures.
Well, they're in Magna Carta. How can I
Of
not
course.
love them?
They have to be.
But yeah, this is an aspect of force and fraud. And there are things, again, certain infrastructure things, national highways. All of these things require us to have a national government, but it should not do those things it does not need to do. And that includes social programs, that includes education, which actually, under the British North America Act, are assigned to the provinces, in which the feds have usurped through their manipulation of their fiscal capacity. So, yeah, I do agree with you. Now, where do we stand when it comes to Aboriginal affairs? In part, the historical answer is, well, Indians are the responsibility of the federal government because of the fact that it was the British authorities dealing with Indian people, sometimes call them nations. I think this is a misapplication of European terminology to a situation where it didn't apply. But they were entities outside the power of the Crown, and then they were brought under the Crown. And again, Aboriginal leaders insist they're still nation to nation. I do not think this is true, but their relationship is not the same at the moment, legally speaking, as, for instance, the relationship of the municipality of Ottawa to the federal government. So you have this historical reason you have to do it. There are treaties. But there's also this larger question: what is the status of an Aboriginal within Canada? And this is a question of, is it a nation-to-nation relationship, or are they Canadian citizens? If they are Canadian citizens, what rights do they have as Canadian citizens, and what rights do they have because their ancestors were given certain promises by the federal government, many of which have not been kept fully and honorably? And I say that whatever rights they have as individuals, but they do have claims on the federal government. And therefore, the reason we need a federal Department of Indian Affairs is to try to fix the mess that has accumulated historically, to resolve the status of Aboriginals. Because, you see, my end game here is there is no federal Department of Aboriginal Affairs because Aboriginals are just Canadians like everybody else. Reserves are converted to municipalities. Their inhabitants have individual property rights. This is one of the terrible things about Aboriginal life in Canada right now, is that on-reserve Aboriginals don't own their homes. They don't own the lots on which their homes sit. They cannot mortgage them to raise money for a business. They cannot sell them to go somewhere else with, say, move to the city with a stake, with some money to afford an education, to try and start a business, to live while they look for a proper job. All of these kinds of things. They're tied to a socialist model that socialism doesn't work for anybody. It's not going to work for Canadian Aboriginals. But the reason we need a federal department is to unravel the mess that has been allowed or deliberately caused to exist between the Canadian federal government and status Indians, which is, again, is a category which to me should be not just abolished outright, but should be wound up with proper compensation. There should not be Canadians with cards certifying what race they are. Mm-hmm. This is a terrible thing. Now, again, I would be willing to buy out Aboriginal status because it was created supposedly to protect their rights. There is a kind of property right in this thing, properly conceived. But we only need the Department of Indian Affairs to make itself unnecessary, and then it should go away. We don't need a federal Department of Oriental Affairs. We don't need a federal Department of Black person affairs. We don't need a federal Department of white person affairs. We don't need a federal department of any race.
Well, or gender.
Yeah,
Women's Affairs, I mean, not to open up a new one, but I don't think we need one.
maybe someone would like to ask about that.
Right.
But in the
Are
meantime,
you fishing
yes,
for a question?
we shouldn't move it down to a local level. We should wind up the whole idea that Canadians should be distinguished on the basis of their race, compensating Aboriginals for past promises not kept as individuals, giving them the same governmental rights and powers and the same responsibilities as everybody else.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Folks, if you would like to play along and ask your question of the professor, go to the URL on your screen. Everything there will be explained. Thanks, and see you next time.